Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the SLLS meeting today, which is commencing after a few months of absence due to the summer break. The last one was on the 23rd of June when Dr. Lalit Chandrakanta spoke on the dream, reality, and the nightmare, where history repeats itself. It was connected with the book written by Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Today we are going to have Professor Narada Warnasuriya, who is an emeritus professor of pediatrics at the University of Sri Lankan and a medical teacher and pediatrician with over 50 years of experience. He's going to talk to us on poetry, a means to inculcate attitudes and evoke humaneness in medical professionals. After I speak to him briefly, he will make his presentation and there will be a Q&A. Narada and I were at Royal College together when we were young boys, and we have maintained contact right through. And it's a pleasure to introduce him today and speak on this very interesting topic. His primary education was at Dharmasukha College, Dharmapala Vidyalaya and Thurston College, secondary at Royal College, Colombo, and then his medical education for the Faculty of Medicine, Colombo of the University of Ceylon, and postgraduate education in pediatrics at the Lady Roger Hospital, Colombo, and the Royal Victoria Infirmary, Newcastle upon Tyne. After graduating in 1968, he worked in the Colombo Group of Hospitals for 3 years until 1971, and then he was seconded to the University of Ceylon as a registrar to the Professor of Pediatrics. In 1973, he joined the academic staff of the Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo. Since then, he has been the staff of 3 universities, the University of Colombo, the University of Sri Lankan and Kothalawa Defence University for 10 years. In between, while on postgraduate leave and sabbatical leave, he has worked in the UK, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as a consultant pediatrician and postgraduate tutor. He moved through the ranks of lecturer, senior lecturer, professor, and senior professor. And at USJ, he was a founder professor of pediatrics and subsequently dean of the Faculty of Medicine, Medical Sciences, and vice chancellor. He's a past president of the Sri Lanka Medical Association, Sri Lanka College of Pediatrics, the Nutrition Society of Sri Lanka. He's chairman of the Committee of Vice Chancellors and Directors. He's a member of the SLMC, National Medical Regulatory Agency, National Science and Technology Commission, the Council of the Open University, National Institute of Education, and the PGIM. He's primarily a clinical teacher in pediatrics, but he has a broad experience in education, including policymaking and teaching. These are some of his awards, which are quite significant. These are some of the papers he has published, just a small amount, just to give you a flavor. Narada, over to you now. Narada, tell us how you got interested in this particular aspect of art and literature. Thank you.
In English, I was reading Apegama and books like that by Martin Wickramasinghe at a very young age. So I have had a passion for reading. So in fact, at Royal College, you were talking about 1955, we were asked to write up our sort of do at Royal College. So I had to confess that I didn't participate in any competitive sports, and the only sort of exceptional thing I did was I was appointed a library reader. Now that's I think Mahendra, you know that, no?
Yeah.
In the lower sixth, because I used to spend a lot of time in the library. So basically, I used to read a lot, and I used to like poetry. And in fact, at the time when when our hormones get aroused and all, and when you like to read erotic things and all that, the only access to erotica at that time was like erotic poetry, like Padmala and I used to read the Cow's Illumina. And we used to sort of interpret the Cow's Illumina to the others in the class, because that was a highly erotic poem like that. Anyway, I'm digressing, but I think so. I have always had a lifelong interest in poetry. And Now I think I know most of Sudhu by heart, and then even some of the other, Vimal Ratnatrikama's poems and all that. I still remember many poems. Now, so while I was in Colombo, somehow in the Colombo faculty, as we didn't have much contact with the arts faculty, this interest did not get stimulated or aroused. But when I went to Javadanapura, that was a totally new experience for me because I came into contact with people like Sunil Lari Ratna, who was the professor of Sinhala, and then most of all, I must acknowledge, in fact, for many of the poems that I'm reading now, Saman Chandra Ranasinghe, he's professor of Sanskrit, but he's an outstanding poet. His father was also a poet. So they really made poetry accessible to me, poetry of all types. And I have a fairly good mind, and if I like a poem, it sticks in my mind. Of course, it's not automatically. I sort of recite it to myself several times. In fact, when I go to bed, I sometimes consider it a nuisance because I'm reciting some poem and all, like that. So,
Narada, just to
yeah.
interrupt you, is this Sinhalese and English poetry or mainly Sinhalese poetry?
Well, mainly Sinhalese poetry, but I used to love English poetry also because, I did English literature. I started off doing Latin and then gave up and gave English literature in the O level. And we had several really good books with poetry. And I don't know whether you all have read Jungle Tide.
Hmm.
In Jungle Tide, there are some beautiful poems. And in fact, the first poem I wrote was a translation of that. In the last page in Jungle Tide, there is a poem called Credo, which is a nature lover saying, although I love nature, I love you more. That is to God. I I changed that slightly differently and said, Swabhava dharmya priyakarannike pen pataking, and wrote a kavi which was adapted from that Jungle Tide. I think I have given you. So basically, that's how I developed my interest. It has been there all the time, and I read poetry. And I'll tell you a bit more about it when I actually give the lecture. So whenever even in the papers, the Sunday papers and all that, like Silumina and all, I used to buy there's a lot of kavi, and I always glance through that and suddenly discover a really nice kavi which I like. So
Another thing I want to ask you, Narada, is something I'm ashamed to say. My
yeah.
Sinhalese is not as good as my English. Your Sinhalese has always been really good. How is that? We both went to Royal, similar
No, I think
background, but your
no,
Sinhalese.
well, no. One is because I mean I used to read a lot of Sinhalese, and of course Padmal was one of my best friends, and we used to co-edit hand paper Whitehall Royal with Padmal. I don't know whether I think most of you all know Padmal, maybe Padmal De Silva, who was senior clinical psychologist in the Institute of Mental Health.
Yeah, yeah.
His first degree was, as you know, in Oriental Sciences, but he then shifted to clinical psychology. So we were very good friends. Of course, Padmal Sinhalese was much better than mine. But later, Gonzal, it's mainly because once I became a lecturer, I was needed to give lectures. I was available to give lectures to anybody. So
Uh-huh.
nurse, radio, and most of those were in Sinhalese. So
Right.
I had to be good in Sinhalese to give lectures. So from 1973 onwards, I have been giving lectures to all agricultural instructors, nurturers, whatever it is, and many in Sinhalese. So I had to keep up my knowledge in Sinhala.
Right, I understand that. One
Yeah.
last question before you start your presentation. Is there a particular life event or something that precipitated your interested in this humaneness and empathy and all that? Was there something that made you think more of that? Some event, or was it just a gradual dawning, or what?
I think it's a gradual dawning. I think if you want to hear a little more, I'll be doing the Carlo Fonseca oration in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, and there I'm talking about uh, what's called the social conscience and medical teaching, and I'll be talking a little bit about how humaneness or that
That
the
aspect of.
importance of that dawns on you. I think in my case, it was a gradual thing. There was no sort of dramatic event.
Okay. So in the medical field, who are your kind of heroes? You say, oh my God, role models, fantastic. Are there anybody?
I have to put, because Priyani was the one who gave me the opportunity to become a pediatrician and join the academia. So I will put Priyani as number one. But although CC had retired, actually we came into, he had not completely retired, and our introductory course in pediatrics was by CC. So CC also is a teacher with a social conscience who has, I don't know how many of you are aware, he is the founder of the Nutrition Society. He's the founder of the Family Planning Association. He's the founder of the Committee for Popularization of Science of the SLLS, all that. So he was also a role model for me. And I'm glad to say I have followed suit in all those activities that he did in all those three societies. Yeah.
Are there any international models, not necessarily doctors, but people you think are good models to emulate in terms of behavior?
Well, I will start with doctors. I trained in Newcastle upon Tyne. So my boss or prof was John Webb, who had been the professor at the Christian Medical College, Velo. He was a good Christian and a good pediatrician, and he really, I think, influenced my way of being a clinician. And then there was a guy called Hugh Jackson in that unit, again, who influenced me a lot. Yes, so many.
So many. And of course, your services are still being sought after. Am I right? You're not retired, but at the same time, you're still working. And
so I am retired. I retired from regular work, undergraduate teaching in the KDU when I became 80. They wanted me to stay on, but I said, I think I'll call it a day. I still teach at the PGIM. There was a course that I was instrumental in formulating, that is MSc in Human Nutrition. So there I do supervise the portfolios even now, and so that's more Zoom teaching. And also, I think in the PGIM, after their 30th anniversary, they look back to see how well they have done. And they came to two conclusions. One was that technically our consultants are doing extremely well, whereas on the professional and ethical side, they were a bit short. This is, I'm telling you, when they were 30 years old, long ago. So, and they appointed a committee to see what to do to rectify that. I was also in that committee, and one of the decisions was to give them 10 workshops in professionalism, different topics. So I think maybe for the last 15 or 16 years, I have been doing a workshop on conflict of interest in doctors. It's a case scenario-based workshop, so that I continue to do. Those are the only two things I do at the moment,
very good.
Mahendra. That is the MSc Human Nutrition, and then of course I get the odd invitation for lectures like this. And
right. The last point to observe before handing over to Narada to give presentation is, let me assure you that the hair on his head is not a wig. The original hair, the secret of his success, I would love to know, because I'm rapidly losing whatever hair I have had. But I mean, look at Narada, it's amazing. Narada, thank you very much. Now I would ask you to share screen and take us through your presentation. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Mahendra, and it's nice to be with all of you. Most of you, I think I know. I can see it now.
Right. Okay.
Can the others see?
Okay. Just tell me when you want to do the next slide. Okay.
Okay. So next slide now.
Right.
So I think a little bit of background. This is something I have always believed. I'm really sort of happy and content to be in two really noble professions. One is being a doctor, and the other is being a teacher. To be frank, I have got more pleasure as a teacher than as a doctor, although I have got pleasure and contentment from both. So I came across this quotation maybe 15 years ago, and I think I really believe in what he says. No man can be a good teacher unless he has feelings of warm affection towards his pupils and a genuine desire to impart to them what he believes to be of good value. Next one, Mahendra. And this one, actually, I was browsing through books in Waterston about 15 years ago when I saw this on the flap of a book. The book was called Courage to Teach. And this particular thing caught my eye. Good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. good teaching comes from the identity and the integrity of the teacher. So I turned the next lap. Yeah, okay. Next one. So he went on to say this. Good teachers possess a capacity for connectedness. They are able to weave a complex web of connections among themselves, their subjects, that means their topics, and their students, so that the students can learn to weave a world for themselves. The methods used by these weavers vary widely. Lectures, Socratic dialogues, laboratory experiments, collaborative problem solving, creative chaos. The connections made by good teachers are held not in their methods, but in their hearts, meaning heart in the ancient sense, as the place where intellect, emotion, and spirit and will converge in the human self. This really struck a chord with me, this quotation. So, going to the next one again, this Kimball, he was the president of the internal medicine board in states, and he is one of the most outstanding teachers of medical professionalism. He is the one who developed what's called the physician's charter, if you're familiar. So this is something he has said. Process of medical education has the potential of providing for greater growth and development, and hence humanization of the individual than other experiences offered to mankind. He is very, very absolutely. He says it is the greatest potential for humanizing. I think as a medical teacher, I feel that he's telling the truth. Maybe others won't agree, but I think there is something in what he's saying. Next. Okay, this is again, I came across this in the library long after, I think after I got my membership also. This is Franciscus de Bo Silvius. I think you have heard of him. He was the professor of medicine in Leiden. Next slide, please. And in 1664, he said this. The role of my method, hitherto unknown here and possibly anywhere else, is to lead my students by the hand to the practice of medicine, taking them every day to see patients in the public hospital, that they may hear the patient's symptoms and see their physical findings. Then I question the students as to what they have noted in the patients and about their thoughts and perceptions regarding the causes of the illnesses and the principles of treatment. I realized that more than 300 years later, I was doing the exact thing almost daily. Right? There was hardly any difference from what he has described to what I do regularly as a clinical teacher. Next, please. So only thing is now, I think many of you I know are doctors, so you might be familiar with this. As you know, our clinical training, the polishing up comes in what's called the professorial appointments, which are in the final year. And there are 5 of them now, and most faculties have 8 weeks for a professorial appointment. And the group size in most faculties in Sri Lanka for a professorial group is about 40. So it's divided 36 to 40 divided into 12. And then these people go to the professor and the other senior lecturers, or maybe there are several professors in some units. So I used to make sure that all students who went through the professorial appointment go through me or have a contact with me either in a ward round or in a clinic or in a sit-down class at least 10 to 12 times during the appointment. And during that appointment, Champa, this was not when you all were students. I was only a senior lecturer then, right? Okay, yeah. I had not planned it so well those days. I just did what Priyani assigned to me, which was mainly on the diarrhea and the malnutrition side, if you remember. But once I became a professor, I used to do it in a planned way. And I had 3 main objectives one is to fine-tune the clinical reasoning using the hypothetical-deductive approach. Now, this is very important because we learned in the traditional way where we take the full history and the examination and then do a DD. But this also I came to realize when I suddenly read the New England Journal editorial saying, why don't we preach what we practice? It was written by a professor of medicine from Harvard. And he said, all over the world, we are teaching this clinical method in an absurdly theoretical way, which is never practiced by any practicing doctor. That is to take a complete history, complete examination, then think of the DD and all that, right? Whereas we are doing it on our feet. As we take the questions, we are hypothesizing as to what is going on, and we are testing the hypothesis. So that is called the hypothetical-deductive approach. And I really take a lot of trouble to polish up the hypothetical-deductive approach in my students in the final year. And at the same time, especially for the humaneness part, the second one is important. I go through the essential steps of the doctor-patient consultation, emphasizing the need for empathy and building of rapport. What exactly should happen when the patient comes into your room? We go step by step. And it's a bit of a brainstorming session. The students also join in with the ideas. And finally, we brainstorm the group on achieving a desirable outcome at the end of the consultation. So this is the approach that I have been adopting. So now we come to the next part, which is about poetry. No, before. Okay. So now the theme is how to improve attitudes. Now, this is a nice description of attitudes. Actually, this was penned by Mevan Piris, who is a chemist, who was a good fast bowler for St. Thomas's during the time that he was president of the Institute of Chemistry. And I thought it's a very nice description. Some of our beliefs are valuable to us and are deeply cherished and get embedded in our minds as values, which serve as a pair of lenses through which we see the rest of the world before us. Based on these values, attitudes result, and that is how mind reacts towards other things and the general environment. It's attitudes that generate responsibilities and the conduct of a person. Next one. So now, this is just a quick list, I think our profession is the one from which people expect the most. In fact, Carlo has said these expectations are unreal and should not be asked from anybody, but these are the expectations from a doctor. It's a very, very tough list. Subordinate their own interest. We have to be altruistic, interest in the interest of others, adhere to high ethical and moral standards, respond to societal needs, evince core humanistic values, exercise accountability for ourselves and our colleagues. Several people in Bristol got struck off for covering up for an incompetent clinician. Demonstrate a continuing commitment to excellence. We have to be always trying to improve ourselves, not merely the knowledge in every aspect of performance. Exhibit a commitment to scholarship and advancing their field. That is, of course, research and publication. Deal with high levels of complexity and uncertainty. I think all of us do that all the time. I'm not saying only doctors. I'm sure if there are accountants or actuaries or engineers here, they also do some of these things or many of these. And reflect upon our actions and decisions, which I must say, I did not do in the past, but during the last 15 or 20 years, I have done it. In fact, when I go to bed, I reflect on what happened during the day. So coming to the main thing, poetry. So what is poetry? Poetry is literary work in which expression of feelings and ideas is given intensity by the use of distinctive style and rhythm. Poems frequently rely for their effect on imagery created by the words, imagery, word association, and the musical qualities of the language used. Wordsworth called it a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So let's try it out. Next one, please.
පනාමුරේ ඇත් රජුනෑ සොයන්නේ අනේගලී ඇතුන් කාටද කියන්නේ අනේගලී ඇතුන් කාටද කියන්නේ.
Hold it there, Mahendra.
That
So
okay?
now, yeah. So shall we hold it there without coming to this? Yeah. All right. Yeah. So now this was an example of what Sunilari Ratna calls a Geya Kavya. That is, although it was a Kavya, it was sung as a song, Geya Kavya. And that was Amarasiri Pirisa's voice. Of course, then that gives you, and then I added the video on top. So all of these are helping you to get your emotions, touched. But very often the poetry is able to do it without that, purely from the word imagery. Right? So let's go to the next one. Now, even this one is a Geya Kavya. You must have heard Nanda Malini singing this with a video. But I think you will just have to put up with me now. I will. Nevat watura malayata in the nala watura. Tamat siten kimi demi ganga diya atara. Ivat gita meda peradiga maru katara. කාටත් පොරෙන් කියවෙයි පැල් කවි නිතර. These are from a housemaid in the Middle East. Sain handana dudaruan udesama. Ain mehewarat noratun lang mehema. Panin beli sitiat yadian sema. Inen magirate nidiyana hamarema. These are this kavi is by Sunilari Ratna. So now, the point I'm trying to say is now this one, I know for a fact that this kavya alone, but of course sung by Nanda Malini, changed the attitudes of I won't mention the name. She's a really good a doctor with good attitudes. In fact, she's on the staff of the Faculty of Medicine now. She told me, she had an extremely negative impression about mothers who left their children and went to the Middle East. She said it was till then when she was HO and doing night duty, and one of the attendants had this on the pocket radio. And when she heard this, Sain Handana Du Daruan Udesama, Ain Me Varata Noratun Langa Mehema. Banin Bandi Sitiyat Yadiyan Sema, Hinen Magi Rate Nidhi and Hamarama. She said the whole perspective of how she looked at these ladies who went to the Middle East changed with this one kavya. Right, Rohan. Rochana is leaving. That's okay. Come, let's go to the next one. Okay. I'll tell you about Manori Gamage later, but look at the image and look at this kavya. Jivite aniyatai. Dana sitiya bawa sabai. ඒත් ඔබ මේ ලෙසින් නොසිතුවෙමි හැර යතයි. ආන්නට දේ බොහෝයි කියන්නත් දේ තිබෙයි. දැක ගන්න මුහුණවත් ඉඩක් නොලැබෙන හැට. දරු පැටව් රකින්නට මා ඉතුරු විය යුතුයි. සමා වුණු හිමියනේ ළඟට ඒමට බියයි. දුරින් හිඳ වැඳ වැටෙමි සමු ගන්න අවසරයි. These a real photograph from the height of the COVID epidemic. I underwent the same experience for my sister. I couldn't actually see her phase at that time, anyhow, I think let's pass on. The point is, poetry has the ability to evoke emotions, both positively and sometimes negatively. I think that is the point I want to make with these 3 points. Shall we go to the next one? Next slide. Yeah, okay. Next one. So now, again, I will tell you when we do the clinical teaching. Now, in all the medical faculties, we have a thing called the introductory course for clinical teaching. That is when they come and, they are taught the initial part of clinical teaching. Now, for a long time during the introductory course, I have been using these poems. This I came across quite accidentally. This is a kavi by P.B. Alvis Pereira. I think people who know about the old Colombo Yuge Kaviyan, Leelai, Kamalai, Champai, Rekai, right? The one who wrote Leelai, Kamalai, Champai, Rekai, P.B. Alvis Pereira. Now, he was a patient with diabetes. This is, in the 1960s in Kurunegala. And he was going to this Dr. Rosa, a burger doctor who was the head of the local hospital. And he had written this kavi about him. And there is many of them, and I've taken some excerpts. Langa inda kiyana vita oba veta tibena lede behetata palamu mada hasa deka suwaya vede. So I discussed these and the meanings with the students. These are the new students for clinical training. I won't read the English. They do not appear to appear so yureku vani. Obage demuna ivasili bava sisila gani. Now this one, of course, I have to explain, especially in this era of 3-minute consultations. He says, Obage demuna ivasili bava sisila gani. Really nice choice. Your unruffled patience soothes. Unruffled patience soothes me. So you can, so without saying that you should not rush over when you're taking a history or examining, the poem says that. The next one, Mahendra. Now, I think I will probably just read it and not try to recite it because Layadun nala kelavara tabu vitadi kane. I think I remember this full poem, so I'll say the whole thing. Yantang muhuna dutu vita hada vatama pene. Dearut nagana bas inda hita muaga tani. Layadun nala kelavara tabu vita di kane. Layatula gasma mata obatak vadiya dani. Right. You can interpret it in both ways, but to me, this is really something about empathy. The ability to feel what the other one is feeling. So he said, Yantam Muna Dutuvita Hadavatama Pemene, that is about the doctor. Then the second line was a bit confusing for me. Dearut Nagana Bats in the Hita Mugatane. Dearut means double meaning. So later I discussed that with actually Sunil Ariyat. He said this was a burger doctor and he was using euphemisms, especially when discussing serious illnesses. And that is what they are nagana bas in the hita muagatani. La usupeti vage maya denete ati balaya malakata suwanda men oba hoba vai nilaya. Look at the beautiful meaning in that. You bear the aura of office like a flower bears its fragrance. So this was very important for my students from the KDU. They are all officers and, they are already officers and they are very sort of conscious of their rank and all that. So I said, see how, now this was a DMO. He's writing about a DMO and the patient writes, Malakata suwanda men oba hoba vai nilaya. How gently he holds his power or his aura. Okay, shall we go to the next one? All right. This is Monica Ruan Patirana. I don't know how many of you are interested in poetry here. Monica Ruan Patirana, I think, was a poetess and a famous writer. She died of a chronic illness, and I think she has written probably about her physician stroke oncologist. I must say I used this particular poem at the Festskrift or the farewell to Sanat Lamabadasuriya. When he retired from Colombo, I was asked to give the keynote. It was at the thing, and I used this to describe him. Ilan hadata suwa dena veda isurana, uam padivadan pavasana edurana, malin mala mataka mal maga visurana. Many are the memories that we have had over the past time. Nirantara mahada vesena miturana. This conveys the need for the physician, especially of a chronic patient, to be a friend. She calls him Nirantara Mahada Vesena Miturana. Right? We'll go on quickly. Next one. So this is, now to be honest, I don't know how many of my vintage and how many have gone through Professor Rajasuriya other than Mahendra. I think there may be at least a few. So Professor Rajasuriya, I must say I was dead scared of. He was a very stern teacher, and in a way, actually, I was not very positively inclined to him as a teacher because he used to put us under so much tension. But then, I can't remember where this first appeared. In a medical newsletter, this set of poems appeared. I mean, I have only taken 3 of them. And I think once I read this, my whole attitude to Raj changed. Because now I think people who know the SLMC book on professional misconduct, they have this whole set of poems in the first page. If you can bear in mind that you are dealing with human life and not with cases, pray, if you can treat them without discriminating whether they are labeled pauper or to pay, if you can rush with equal alacrity to see a case that needs attention stat, if it's no matter there is no bakshi in it, yet if offered, you can refuse it flat. If you can by a smile cheer up the ailing, or by a touch relieve the suffering pain, if you can by a word console the dying, who will never taste this earth's tortures again. I think there are 4 more stanzas, which I have not included here. I think many of you may be familiar with this because, as I said, it's in this SLMC publication. Next one, Mahendra. Am I going too fast?
No, you're fine. Just to add, Narada, I belong to a local book club, and I was asked to read If by Rudyard Kipling. So I said, with your permission, I'm going to read an adaptation by an old professor of mine in Sri Lanka, and they were absolutely thrilled by it and amazed by it and touched by it. So it's a wonderful poem. I agree with you. Okay.
Now this is a patient speaks out. These Trixie Martinez. So these people don't know. Trixie was one of the 4 nurses who went out in the 40s, or no, not in the 40s, in the 50s, to the Delhi School of Nursing, sent on a government's call. All 4 of them did outstandingly well as nurses. She became an outstanding nursing teacher. I knew her personally. She's a really good teacher, and she's written several books, even on etiquette and things like that. And this is what she wrote to a nursing, well, not a journal, a newsletter. A patient speaks out. This was the time where every other month there was either a doctor's strike or a nurse's strike or a pharmacist strike or something like that. Strikes, nurses, doctors, oh heavens. Haven't they had a formal professional learning in that noble art of patient care, in a spirit worthy of their kind? Shouldn't they their skills together blend to help us patients, help ourselves, help us meet our daily needs? For the rights they are empowered with, for the mercies they are blessed with, aren't they obliged, and shouldn't they be grateful to the countless generous people who till and toil and sweat so to make them what they are, nurses and doctors? So this lady, I think, was a really graceful and outstanding teacher. We invited her as a visiting professor to the nursing course when I was the dean at Jawadanapura. And I think she's made a great impact on nursing education. Next one. This is again to show, this is from the SLMA news. I think during the time I was president, the SLMA news, we used to publish contributions from patients also. So this is, I think, a patient's lament. By the way, not all the poems I am showing here, I have actually used myself directly in patient teaching. I am including some which to show the potential for teaching or using in situations in order to develop attitudes or this thing. So a patient, dear doctor, I am waiting for you for your gentle advice and medicine. Last month I waited for 2 long hours, hungry, tired, frustrated and sick. I watched the others with equal discomfort. The hospital disinfectant made me nauseous. The crowd near your door waiting for you, obnoxious. Not him, not the doctor, the crowd. That's obnoxious, right? Okay. I sat on the cold bench and read, life is uncertain, death is certain, right? Okay. So this is, I think, for people who have been to the waiting areas of any leading hospital in Sri Lanka, you can experience this. Next one. So now I'm going on to, because actually Mahengee, in this original thing, I to influence attitudes in other professionals also. I think Mahengee gave my CV. I was virtually kicked upstairs from the dean's post to vice chancellor in Jawadanapura because my two predecessors both had to leave their post. One was removed and one leave voluntarily because of killing. Death in the university. That was, I mean, it was chaotic there. We were more closed than open. So the council pleaded with me to take over the job. And that's how I ended up as vice chancellor. It was a serendipitous thing. And then now, once I became vice chancellor, I told you, this is the period during which I got a lot of poetry given to me by many of my lecturers, because we had a really superb faculty of humanities or arts. And there were many people who gave me books and poetry, etc. And especially Professor Samanchandra Ranasinghe, he was not a professor then, used to send me these poems. So this is Jagatgamini Mawatagama, who was an alumnus of Jawadanapura. And I used to talk about university in various other lectures, and I used to always quote Carl Jaspers. And Jaspers had this 3-center model, the center for training professionals, the center for finding knowledge or generating knowledge, the center to provide philosophers a place to think. That was the concept, Jaspers's concept of a modern university. So Jagatgamini Mawatagama has put those ideas into poem. And I use this poem regularly at every new batch induction, mainly in the other faculties, the whole theatre for 1,000 students. And I had to give the first speech. I used to tell what I expected of them. මේක මම පුළුවන් බලන්නම් රිසයිට් කරන්න පුළුවන්. ගැටුමෙන් ගහන ලොවකට නොගැටුම කියන අවුලින් පිරුණ ලෝකය නිරවුල් කරන දෙවියන් මෙන් පෙනෙන මිනිසුන් වැඩ වෙසෙන Senesun sadisi vietu sara saviarana. Very tall expectations, certainly didn't achieve it, but to some extent, I think it generated good feelings, at least among some students, if not all. The next one, Mahengee. Okay, this is again a real experience. I was the president of the SLMA in 2009. So that's the year the war ended. And as you know, the SLMA has two sessions. In August, we have the annual sessions. And in September, October, we have what's called the foundation sessions. Both have been always held in Colombo by tradition. So that year, I managed to convince my council that we should take the foundation sessions to Jaffna. Because the war had just, they all agreed to it. And it was a tremendous success. We had over 350 participants in Jaffna for the foundation sessions of the SLLS. And we were quite surprised. And as again, in a way, although we had access to auditoria in the university, we decided to conduct the session in the auditorium of the Public Library of Jaffna. I think most of you know the significance that had only recently been renovated. So we had our SLMA foundation sessions. I think it was the real first big sessions that the Public Library Auditorium has conducted. So we conducted it in the Public Library Auditorium. And to our surprise, the president of the Jaffna Medical Association came and told us, you know, the students of the Faculty of Medicine Jaffna have decided to conduct a concert or a variety entertainment in honor of the faculty who have come for these sessions. It was not at all in our agenda. It was a really pleasant surprise. And, you know, the war was just over, you know, I mean, like not a long time. And the wounds would have been still very fresh, you know, and I know how the wounds were because I did go to, you know, Vaunia to the Manic farm where the centers were. As a representative of the College of Pediatricians, we went there to set up the various camps and the health things, and I saw actually what had happened and the patients there soon after the war. So it was a really pleasant surprise. And this variety entertainment, they had a theme. And the theme was the raining day. And everything was related to rain. And even the Bharatanatyam was related to rain. And I remember, first of all, Colvin was asked to talk. Colvin was asked to talk. And I remember Colvin gave a very good speech related to, I mean, this was off the cuff, just impromptu. And he of course quoted Devo Vasatu Kalena, you know, which, as you know, the Sarvodaya uses it in Sinhalese, and people who know that poem, yeah, so I think Tiloma might know it. Kal Vasi Vasiva Ketvat Saraveva Satsit Niveva Rajaya Dhamiva Loadaveva. So Colvin used that poem referring to the rain. And then I was asked by this girl, she really spoke excellent English. I think she had been in Canada, this girl who was the compeer. She asked me to come and express my view about the concert and about what happened. So I was really taken by surprise. I was not ready for a speech. But as I told you, I had quite a memoir of, you know, a collection of poems in my mind, you know, poems which had like me. So I went up and first of all, I apologized for not speaking to them in Tamil. I said, I am ashamed that I can't speak to you in Tamil. And I said, instead of speaking to you in Sinhalese, I would like to express my feelings about you in the form of two poems, which I will, of course, translate for you verbally at the end. And these were the two poems I used. This vena alut alokaya idiri pita adatat vada lassana viya hakiya heta himhane malavuna wal goyamakata odavessak wage obapiya karuya mata. So that I said this, my feeling about you, my feeling about you. Then next I said, this is my expectation about you and me. This is my expectation for the
For such a plan, Monsieur Cust had neither the cunning, the daring, nor, may I add,
Shreya, can you mute, please?
Yeah.
the murderer
So-
must have flirted with Mademoiselle Betty Barnard. Somehow he
Shreya,
thought that the
Karuparama,
woman
Karupana,
had buried.
Shreya, can you
Should
mute,
this-
please? I'll mute, I can mute.
You have seen Monsieur Cust? Can you imagine Monsieur Cust, as you
Right.
English say,
This was-
getting off with a pretty
No,
young
you
girl?
have not managed to
Monsieur
mute yourself.
Cust may
I'm trying to, right.
Okay. පෑගෙන සියලු වැලි කැට සුසි නිඳු වේවා නෑවෙන දිය පොදක් සේ සීතල වේවා පාවෙන සුළඟකින් අපසිට යාවේවා යායක පැසෙන ගොයමක් සේ සරු වේවා. I actually recited this. I was, 14 years younger then, had a stronger voice. And it was quite effective. And I translated it and I got a standing ovation. And the next day, there was actually a seminar about reconciliation. I think this is our mixed chance. You know, I don't want to be political. This was our mixed chance. In 2009, there was so much potential for reconciliation between the two races. And in that session, I remember we had a very, very friendly discussion. And some of the speakers referred to this poem and what I said in the serious discussion the following day at the session. That was about how to go ahead, especially in the field of medical education. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one. This again, I'll tell you the actual scam. No, this was, we talked about this Festschrift. I mean, Festschrift, as you know, is a German word which is used for the retirement, where it takes the form of several of the students or friends or colleagues of the retiring professor actually making presentations in his honor. So there was a Festschrift for me, and people like Saroj and all make presentations there. But I had to make a speech there and reflect a bit about my own professional life. And again, I can tell you very genuinely, I said, I have one really, really serious regret. Because although I wanted to go as a DMO and serve in a rural area, it never happened. Actually, I had actually got a transfer also. Due to circumstances, I ended up as registered to Prof, and then I ended up in an academic career. And then reflecting back, I said, I really, really miss that. And I think it's a hiatus or a missing part in my life. The fact that I never served what I called a deprived or a needy community. I was around the clock tower most of the time, right? Okay. So then I said, a person who had served such a community, and there I'm not talking only about doctors. I was talking maybe a grammar worker, maybe a teacher, especially teachers. I don't know how many of you have seen the film called Hogana Pukuna, like teachers, grammar workers, maybe village priest or a village, even a Catholic priest in a Catholic area. Any of these people who have served such a community for a long time can earn this for their epitaph. ජීවිත අඳුරු වී යන කඳුලටම තෙමි අඳුනා ගැනීමෙහි මෙතුවක් නියැලුනෙමි හදවත් සුවඳවත් කර ආයත හිමි ඔබ මෙන් මමත් අවසානයේ දියව යමි. So I used this. I think I was invited to be the keynote speaker in a joint convocation of the National Colleges of Education. That is where all the schools where the teachers, when they graduate, so they had a combined one over 3 years, and there were over 1,000 teachers. And all of these were being put into what's called a Dushkara Palata, Dushkara Pasala. They were being sent into remote schools. So I used this to want to motivate them. Whether it worked or not, I'm not sure, but I used this actually in a setup like that. Next one. This is actually by Sarath Gamini. I think many of you know him, my colleague and friend, who is a really outstanding poet in English. He has several publications. I think he has 2 or 3 booklets of poetry. And this is one of his poems. Now, I told you we have this series of workshops for doctors on professionalism. One of the workshops is about self-care or caring for the doctor. So I don't do that, but I think this poem would be an excellent addition to that self-care workshop on professionalism. I kept saying I was not old. Now I realize I was too bold. Truth was clear as the story unfolded. Arteries blocked, my feet got cold. Cholesterol was high 4 years ago. Needed more tests but didn't undergo. Too busy for that, always on the go. Didn't want to be sick, bad for my ego. The scar on the leg and one on the chest. Wounds have healed and they didn't fest. After many years and enforced rest, now I am okay, feeling at my best. So much trouble could have been avoided, but I advise others if I simply abided. Priorities in life now I have amended. Wiser in the future, it is firmly decided. I think I don't have to explain. Let's go to the next one. Okay, is Rasika in the audience?
I don't think she's here today.
I don't think, yeah. Okay, Rasika is also a poetess both in English and Sinhalese. And this she contributed, I think, to the Komsa News. And it's really, walking down Kinsey Road, there is a nostalgic sense of journey. We see the familiar horns, the white colonial building, where we bowed as novices at a great seat of learning as we entered a noble profession which was our calling. Fresh out of school, we braved the wide world, excited, happy, hoping dust would turn to gold. With hard work and determination, most achieved their goal. Though sports, fun, and laughter also played a role. So I think this really evokes very positive feelings about our alma mater. And I thank Rasika for it. She's written so many other poems. Now, this, of course, I'll give you a small preface for it. So I told you I like poetry, and my students knew that I like poetry. This is when I was in Javadalpura. I don't think Champa and all knew that at the time that I taught in Colombo. But in Javadalpura, they knew very well because, you see, we were in an old building at Javadalpura at the back of the library, and there was this dark staircase, 3 stories. And on the landing, there used to be a Bitti Puatpata by the students. And that Bitti Puatpata always had at least 1 or 2 poems written by students. And I think the students have seen me stopping and reading the poems, if not the pieces of prose. I used to read the poems very carefully. And I think, so one of them who probably noticed this, his name is Janaka Seneviratna. By the way, he is now a fairly senior medical officer in Ratnapura, and I think he was the president of the doctors for the NPP in Ratnapura. But I didn't know that at that time. He was a student in the 4th year. He came and gave me a book of poems that he had written called Aswan. And he wanted me to go through it and give my comments about it, which I did. But I don't know whether it was my comments or not. My comments were mainly very positive, but he never actually published it. But I think I have got his permission to use some of the poems that he had in that collection. So, Kaviya Mata, this is the rationale for writing poetry that he has written. Kaviya Mata Sumitureki Masita Vida Sanka Sindalana. Kaviya Supem Vatiyaki Ma Hada Sa Pipasa Handunana. Kaviya Gang Dievaraki Ma Manasitum Dahara Paturana. Kaviya Sunduru Aviyaki Manasa Tulas Anduru Sitivili Bindalana. සවිය ඔබමය යඳම් බිඳගෙන ඉදිරියට මා ගෙනියනා අවිය ඔබමය රුදුරු සතුරන් සොදුරු පහරින් එළවන නැවිය ඔබමය මහද නැව මහා මුහුදු වෙරළට කැඳවන කවිය ඔබමය මහද විල මැද පියුම් කුසුමන් පුබුදන. So I think writing poetry really kept him going as a student. As you can read, he was a Sinhalese educated student from a village, from a fairly poor background. I think there were lots of poems relating to social justice, etc., which I have not included in by excerpts. This was, as I told you, these were selected by me about 10 years ago when I gave this lecture first to the Medical Humanities department in Colombo. So he had written poetry, I think, kept him going. Can we see some of his? I took some of the more interesting or humorous ones from his collection. Let's go to the next one. Some excerpts from an anthology of poems by medical students. Kurutu Gagi. Wata tula noma vivakutu obe sitte aratu kiyawawen nata satutu liyamudagi yakurutu. So this Kurutu Gi is very, the world's most famous Kurutu Gi is, of course, on the Sigiri wall, the Sigiri graffiti. But in the universities, this Kurutu Gi is very common, especially in lecture halls where there were wooden desks. So these of the thing. Now there was a very famous professor of Sinhalese in Kelaniya who was also a poet. His name was Minuwan P. Tilakara. So after he retired, and some of the lecturers went through, and he used to always monopolize that particular tutorial room for his lectures. They found on one of the desks a poem like this. Ane Minuwan, Ube Desuman, Magi Denuwan, Karai Adawan. I don't know, that was Ane Minuwan, Ube Desuman, Magi Denuwan, Karai Adawan. Now, you see, unknowing to the student, Minuwan had actually achieved his goal because he has made the student write good poetry, although he wrote poetry critical of his teacher. Now, these what our friend wrote about the prof unit. I have already talked about the prof unit. Benung gahuwa, kola pirewa, sign gahuwa, hari kiwa. Right? So that I think we are all familiar with that. That this is the merit list. Mind you, this is here he wrote this in the 80s. ආසාවට කන්න පොල් සම්බලක් නෑ භාෂාවට දන්න ඉංග්‍රීසියක් නෑ ගෝසාවට යන්න දැන්නම් බයක් නෑ. I think he's getting cold feet before the final. ගාසා තීරයට යවුවත් කමක් නෑ. Right? Right? Okay, let's go to the next one. Well, so I told you, I'll tell you about Manori Gamage later. Manori was the first batch at Javadanapura, which I taught. She not only got distinctions in every subject, right through the course, she topped the all-island merit list. The combined merit list, Javadanapura first batch, she topped it. Her parents are both school teachers. She was Manori Pereira. She's married to a gastrointestinal surgeon who is a batchmate, Manori Gamage. And I'm very proud to say I was so overjoyed when she applied to the Department of Pediatrics to be a lecturer soon after her internship, and I had no hesitation to recruit her. Now today, she's a professor in pediatrics and the dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences. And she's also an outstanding poetess. I think I already showed you a poem written by Manori. She always sends me all her new creations. So this is, she said she wrote this after taking the history from a girl who had been sexually abused, a very young girl. As you know, people who are familiar with child abuse, We know that when a patient with child abuse comes, we don't allow our house officers or even the SHOs to take the history because it is very harmful for the child to have the history taken repeatedly. So it's always taken by the most senior people, and very often consultants themselves take the history. But it's a harrowing task, especially when you have to take it from a young child. So this is Manori's feelings about such an experience. Pipi podi una malaka yakekuge daddy ataka. Tetwa giya as dekaka kiloma walakanu noheka. Ite porakai sitengi wadana kandu noma dodai nete terapai kandulu numudu kopalata teme. Obe siumal sitata kese tawa duk demida. Gune kohomada, koheda, kohoma mama asanna. Diga herei binden binda yakage horava akuru amuna gotami e kata mala. Bondava dievei akuru ma noemi veradikaru. Hadavaten nagi kandula pan hinden galanaka. So this is again showing what emotions you can evoke through poetry. I think I have come to the end, Mahendra. Let's see the next one. No. One. Right. Okay, this is Shanta Etiarach with Carlo, as you can see in the first picture. Shanta was our student in the 80s, and he is a really outstanding journalist and a poet. He has written several books of poetry, and I think this other picture is at the launch of one of his books with Carlo and me. So let's see the poems he had written. This is about Carlo. Gevila gihin ati mut hari dura vayasa. Gevila gihin naha e tara mata manasa. This is really true. This is Carlo as he was just maybe a month before his death. Gevila gihin naha e tara mata manasa. Mavila pene tawamat veda vidu piyasa. Pirila tibuna heti ubesene hasa yasasa. So that's what he wrote about Carlo. And then he has written about Carlo and me, the experiences. Dedena ekwa sandaha sama samajaya kalade mata keyaki ugayaka gevi giya. Sikkiri rasaya adatatne vivadaya amataka karanu kelesada e purane. How can we forget that? I remember this was the time that I, as a senior lecturer, we started a thing called the Social Studies Circle. And many of these people were involved in it. I didn't do active politics within the campus at all, never. But I certainly help students to develop good feelings about the medical practice. So I think this is the last one, Mahendra. I used this as the last poem in my E.M. Vijayarama endowment lecture. As you know, now it's called E.M. Vijayarama oration. It's given by invitation to past presidents of the SLMA. It's a very prestigious talk. And my talk was reminiscences of a professional life. And I concluded with this poem. Issarat das sayo sitiya saramba pē sasa rehi puruddeng aswahak ne adak ehemai hetat etan his novedde dos kiyana aya dos kiyaddeng udana aya buhu man pudaddeng gas වැටෙද්දෙන් පැල හැදෙද්දෙන් දලු දමද්දෙන් mal පිපෙද්දෙන්. So this is about the old generation, the present generation, and the future generation, and how it smoothly transmits from one to the other. And I think, I didn't know, that was another one. This is, I think, I ended my presidential address to the College of Pediatricians in 2004 was the role of a pediatrician as a teacher. I think I ended up that talk with this poem, which is from William Blake, which, as you know, is a quiet name. It's a feminine poet, what goes as William Blake, to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Have I taken more than an hour, Mahengee?
No, you're fine, you're fine.
Right, okay. Conclusion. I have given you a miscellany of poems in English and Sinhala written by patients, doctors, students, and teachers. They demonstrate that poetry can be a powerful tool to inculcate desirable attitudes and evoke humaneness in students and professionals. So I'm done now. Thank you.
Well, Narada, that was fantastic. I mean, brilliant. I have no words to describe it. I will start the Q&A. I'll put the gallery view so that I can see everybody. That's it, yeah. And I know that some of you don't have the complete gallery view. Perhaps Ruan also can assist me in spotting people who want to ask questions. Can you all put your video on if you don't mind? I mean.
Yeah, I also like to see the faces as
Yeah, we like to see the faces.
So it's so nice to see you all.
My camera is not working.
You only.
This is Priya. My camera is not working. Sorry.
Right.
That's okay.
Your camera is working.
Yeah, it's really nice to see you all.
You have to wear only something above your waist. Below your waist, you can.
I say Quera is also there. Is that Quera there? Hi, Quera. See you after a long time. Okay.
So there are many others who would you mind putting your videos on? It will be nice to see.
Hello, Narada.
Shelton. Hello, Narada. They're coming. They're coming. Some more, please. We want to see.
Right. Okay.
Narada would love to see you all.
Yeah.
Hi, Narada.
Hi. So I must apologize for not being able to recite those poems.
No, you did a grand job. You did a good job. Yeah.
Right. I did a better job 10 years ago. Right.
Any more to put features? We'd like to see you.
Here Diniti is here. Diniti, by the way, is Diniti's lecture over? Diniti Fernandez?
There she has put on herself. There.
Has Diniti already given a lecture?
I don't think.
You all? I know that she's.
We have
It's in November.
November.
Okay, I'll give a promotion for her. Please don't miss Diniti's lecture.
Thank you, sir. But you already, I think you already heard my lecture at
I have heard it. That's why I'm saying don't miss it. It won't be like mine. It will be absolutely flawless. And
thank you, sir.
Better researched.
I'm flattered, but it's not true.
And much better presented. So I'm promoting Diniti's lecture and the topic. Don't miss it. Right?
Okay, there you are.
Thank you
You
so
have it
much.
better. Right. Okay. Now the first question from Mahesh Nirmalan. Can you unmute, please? Good.
Yeah. So brilliant talk. Apologies, I was a bit late. I'm actually on call in the hospital at MRI. Brilliant and lovely to see Diniti as well. So one question which I wanted to ask, I mean, particularly building on the point that you made in passing about the missed opportunities of 2009. I have read quite a bit of poetry. I mean, I can't say I've read quite a bit, but some, mostly from India. I was thinking of Tagore. There was another guy called Subramania Bharati. Their poetry was focused around building a nation post-independence. So they used the power of language and poetry to build a nation, particularly the guy called Subramania Bharati, whose poems I'm very familiar with from South India. But unfortunately, my perception of poetry in Sri Lanka on both sides of the ethnic divide has been, it leads into an ethno-nationalism. I'm thinking of some academics who were in the university during our time. I like to get your view on that. Where did we go wrong? Or did we go wrong at all?
Of course, we went wrong. I mean, we went wrong, but there are exceptions. There are people who write. Those are exceptions. As you know, most of them, as you say, are very ethno-nationalistic. I must say, the Indian Tagore. Now, see, to me, the most beautiful national anthem in the world is the Indian national anthem, which, as you know, is a poem by Tagore. And they have alternative national anthem, Vande Mataram, which is also so beautiful. I think both of them are really worth listening to, right? Okay. I agree with you. I agree with you. You see, we have been so inward looking, and we had this golden opportunity in 2009. To be honest, I mean, they started off well, trying to build, getting school children to Colombo and things like that in the first year soon after the war. Then the whole thing went haywire. And we really missed an opportunity where we could have, I mean, the two ethnic groups could have come together. To me, it was such a shame. I must say that, especially after that 300, I mean, almost exclusively Tamil doctors from that whole district participated in that. There was so much of enthusiasm, and that's in the medical field. But I think in the country too, there was similar enthusiasm. I can still remember when the school children from Jaffna came to Colombo and they went to, and they were shown on TV. There was so much of positive feeling for people who were watching, but they were only gestures and they were not continued, and it never happened. And I agree in the literature too, there are shortcomings. We are very, we are limited to our culture. Very, very difficult to find trans-cultural kind of poems. I fully agree with Mahesh. I listened to your full interview and I fully agree with you, the what you gave in Sinhalese. Right?
I mean, there are obviously exceptions. So one that comes to mind is Sandarasi Sudhusingh. She's a librarian in Matra who wrote the Ginivedunu Piyapat about the burning of the library and all, very, very emotive poetry. Clearly, there are exceptions. But then that leads to the question that how can we avoid missing the current opportunity that we have post elections? The new president, and also there seems to be a lot of positive feelings coming from the Tamil diaspora, Tamil, things that are happening in Jaffna particularly seems a bit encouraging, at least now. Yeah, so
I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful that at least on that front, we will progress. I'm really hopeful, but I don't know whether the politics would permit it, as the way I can see how the camps are forming now for the election. So I don't know whether the politics will get in the way, but I'm really hopeful that the missed opportunity of 2009 would be taken on today in that aspect.
Narada and Mahesh, I think this is a very important topic. We could talk for a long time, but there are so many other aspects we have discussed today. So let's bear in mind what both of you said, and let's hope for. Are there any other question? Anybody with a raised hand? I look at the chat box in a minute, but is there anybody who wants to ask a question? Can you put your hand up, please? Real hand or Ruan, please.
Hi, Narada. Thank you very much for that lovely talk. I enjoyed every bit of it. So my question is regarding how we encourage additional skills in medical schools. So it's confined to medical schools. So in my time, I can remember there were very few opportunities. For example, I can remember Professor Early Fonseca started the choir, which I joined. And but I believe there are few more opportunities now. There is orchestra, I believe, in Colombo.
Much more.
Yes. Could you just give us an idea of what is available now to encourage additional skills?
Much more. There are so many musical groups, and we have so many gipaduras, and there is so much of creation. There are so many places for them to publish. There is much more, and the humanities. Now, I mean, of course, Colombo has the first department of medical humanities. Saroj is the one who started, and they have regular activities. But in all the other universities, I mean, I went to Javadanapura again. Now, Javadanapura, that this opportunity. I mean, I was invited where I was invited to come and choose 5 songs that I like, 5 or 6 songs, and the songs were sung impromptu by a group of students. right? You know, and the band and the orchestra was there, and I had to read, and I of course had to talk about the song, why I chose that song and why I like it and all. So like that, there is a lot, Ruwan. I'll tell you one thing. Say the 89, I mean, there are 89 graduates here. Are there any 89 graduates here? I mind the way, Nirmalan is one of them. You see, 89, it was an absolute disaster in that medical education was stalled for 3 years. Now, that was terrible. But only thing is that opened it out for medical students to get involved in various activities. And I think so many people found other ways of keeping themselves occupied during that time. And there are so many people from that batch and subsequent batches who have become so versatile, not merely in the humanities, but in other areas, in technology, on entrepreneurship, and things like that. I know that one of the graduates who performed very well from the NCMC, he has a company which writes company reports. They are the best in Sri Lanka.
Manjula, can you mute yourself, please? I'll mute. Right. Okay, carry on.
You know, so now, Ruwan, unlike your time, there is great versatility and there is great opportunity for getting involved in other things. And the gap distance between Thurston Road and Kings Road had shortened a lot. You know what I mean? During our time, we were in a cocoon. To me, when I went to Jawadanapura, it was a real experience of meeting all the other faculties, and because in Colombo, we hardly ever met the other academics in Colombo. So that was the disadvantage, but now it is different. Now there is a lot of interaction.
Diniti Fernando.
Just to just to make you feel. So as I told you, in the 1980s, after I went back actually in 77, but I started this thing called the Social Studies Circle in 78 or 79. I think the first president was Ratnapriya, who was later GMOA president, and now he is the director of a private hospital. So the first lecturer we invited was Kumari Jayawardena, who, as you know, is a sociologist, Lal Jayawardana's wife. Mahesh, I mean, did you come to her lecture? See,
yes, I remember that well. I remember that well. Yes, indeed.
Physiology lecture. You know, the topic she chose. The topic she chose was, why are medical students the dumbest of all university students when it comes to other, right? And she really provoked everybody there by saying, she said, you know, when I go to a party and when I see a doctor approaching, now I'm scratching my head to know what to talk with him. So I have to either talk about my car and, you know, this thing like that, or I'll have to talk about the rugby match I saw, or I'll have to say that I have dandruff, or like that. You see, so Colvin could not reply there and said, I dread people like you, because whenever I go to a party, people like you approach me and spoil my party. You remember Mahendra?
Okay, yeah, definitely. Diniti, your turn. Diniti Fernando.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just wanted to say two things, because Prof Narada brought up Colombo Medical Faculty to the discussion. So I work there, and I work closely with the Department of Medical Humanities, although my primary appointment is in the Department of Physiology. As Sir already said, that there are a lot of activities now under the Humanities, Society and Professionalism stream in the medical faculty. So Nirmalan was there for one of our programs called Humanitas, where we bring in the arts to generate emotions among the students, and with the hope that it will cause transformative learning. So poetry is one big area that we use in this activity, and in addition to that, we use paintings, music, drama, movie, cinema, and a lot of other dance and a lot of other things. So things I think have changed and I hope for the better in the Colombo Medical faculty. And also the next thing I wanted to say was, even among the medical profession, I think medical humanities is gaining a kind of a regular place in their conferences, because in the SLMA, we have had now regular medical humanities symposia for the last few years, and sometimes in other colleges as well. So first of all, I want to thank Professor Narada for that brilliant lecture and today, and also for being a forerunner in this whole process of bringing in humanities to our profession. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Diniti. Before I come to you, Mahesh, there is a question.
Mahendra, I want to just add something to it.
Okay,
I mentioned a lecturer in the medical faculty whose opinion about mothers going to the Middle East changed. Diniti's colleague, Santosh Shah. Santosh Shah actually listened to that poem, and she said, I used to have an extremely negative view about mothers who go to the Middle East till I heard that poem. Sai Nandana.
Okay, before I come to Mahesh, there's a question on the panel by Raj, who's my brother, by the way. There is a perception in Sri Lanka today that many medical specialists are more concerned with money rather than the health outcomes of patients they see. Some reportedly see in excess of 50 patients in a few hours, devoting maybe 5 to 10 minutes, if you're lucky, to each patient. While it is wrong to generalize and quote unsubstantiated opinions, have contemporary doctors lost a sense of values compared to doctors of the past? So that's the question. Now,
my answer is actually, the short answer is no, because you're talking about a minority, especially of specialists really at the top of the rung, who I have seen. Actually, there are people who see 100 or so. I mean, I don't mind dermatologists, but even in other specialists, there are people who see 100, right? Okay. So this is, of course, not the rule, the exception. And actually, people don't realize that they are only a small portion of the doctors. And among the consultants also, not all are like that. I think they are a minority. I think many of you who come and have your relations and illness and all sometimes undergo bad experiences at the hands of one or two people like this. But don't take that to be. I'm telling you, as a teacher and a person who has been viewing what is happening, that is not the general truth. Especially the medical officers and even even nurses have a bad reputation in Sri Lanka if you read the papers. But if you know the nurses and how they work, my view is extremely positive about the majority, right? Okay.
do you want to add anything, Raj? Do you want to say anything, Raj?
I mean, but I agree that there are a minority who are really blemish on our profession.
Yeah.
Thank you, Narada. Yeah, my question was really, as I said, it's wrong to generalize. So you have clarified that, for which I'm thankful. I was primarily referring to private practice, doctors in private practice in hospitals. Quite a few people have had this experience, but as you say, there are many private practitioners, and there may be a few who are like that. So if it is a few, that's a good sign. But
I think, Raj, this should be regulated. I hope I mean, these are area which needs to be regulated. Needs to be regulated. In most countries, you are supposed to give a certain time to each patient, depending on the specialty. If you're a psychiatrist, you have to give at least half an hour. For a first patient, maybe for an old patient. So this is, it's a lack of regulations, the lack of, and I think this needs to be regulated. So I don't know whether it will happen or not, but few people are bringing dishonor to the profession by this practice.
Anybody else?
Sorry, Raj. I hope. No, I said thanks, and I hope it will be regulated, because I'm here in Australia, and as Narad rightly says, if I see a specialist here, that person spends at least half an hour with me, going through my case study and giving the right type of advice. I hope it happens in Sri Lanka too, because see, private practitioners are seen by people of all walks of life, not just people who have money to spend for private practice, but even, very ordinary people. And it's a pitiful situation if they don't get the necessary attention in private hospitals from specialists. But if it's a minority of doctors, then that's heartening. Yeah. Thanks.
I saw a question coming up from Ruan. Ruan, you want to ask it or you put it down?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that, yes, it's true, even in my time, there were Dr. Mudalalis, but we need to ask the simple question, why do patients choose to go to certain Mudalalis more and more? So, what I have written there is every single headache, everybody wants the top neurologist in the country. Every tummy ache, they want to go to the top gastroenterologist. So basically, it's a two-sided thing. If the patients decide, okay, this person and this person, there's no big difference, probably that's part of the solution. So attitude change is also required.
I agree with you, Ruan. I think, yeah, there are so many physicians who probably would give more time, but they go out to the same guy, and that there were some physicians used to give a certain number up to 9, and if you want to see him after 9, the fee was doubled, and there were lots of takers for the double fee after 9, like that. So Ruan has a point. It's
But
the attitude of patients.
Narada, can I put it to you just for discussion? Isn't it one reason is that people put their health above anything else, and they feel that the best deal can be obtained from a certain person, and that's partly how that person might have cultivated the scenery.
Yeah,
Maybe we are the best person.
Not partly. Some of the people who are popular like that are actually good clinicians, and also probably they have developed the ability to see rapidly and make a quick assessment. And especially the people who are full-time in the private sector, the people who have money, they are more appealing because they know that in an emergency, that person can be contacted even during day, etc. So some of the people in this category have, as you say, it's a very complex problem, not a simple thing, and the blame is not entirely with the doctor only. As one says, it's partly with the consumer, but it's a complex problem. As Gonzalo says, sometimes they are going that because they are perceived as good or having a good day or success or whatever it is.
Nirmalan, do you have another question to ask? Any observation?
Just to build on what Ruan asked and what about the medical humanities. I had the privilege of taking part in a couple of sessions in the Colombo faculty, which Diniti and Santosh Fernando organized. I mean, the quality of some of the ideas and the sentiments that were brought out were absolutely exceptional and mind-blowing. And it's very heartening to see that those gentler sides of humanity being brought out through these activities. And I hope it's not confined to Colombo. And I'm really encouraged when Sir Narada Warnasuriya said that Jawadrapura and other universities are also having similar activities. It was truly exceptional, Diniti, I must say, the workshop I took part.
Narada,
Thank you very much.
Who is that? Somebody wants to ask a question? Is it?
So someone said thank you very much.
I said thank you to Nirmalan.
Thank you. Narada, my question is this. Medicine has changed a lot since I was in active practice in the way of how many investigations are available, how deeply you can go into a problem, and how much you can unearth. First, we used to work on the probability principle quite a lot, not just the possibility principle. So if I see someone with a headache, I look at probabilities more than possibilities. So anybody with a headache could have a brain tumor in theory, but that's not the way you operated. Now medicine is going in a trajectory where people are getting more and more into all the possibilities and trying to exclude them by doing expensive, time-consuming investigation, which is swamping the NHS for one thing. Now, how do you see this marrying with the humanity aspect of giving enough time and care to people who have problem, in a climate where more and more people are demanding things which are not quite fair because of IT advances, because of knowledge advances through various sources. So there was a time when you could tell the patient, look, I'm your doctor, I've examined you, I have taken history and I have done various tests, that's it. They won't come and say, but doctor, you didn't do a CT scan, or you didn't do an MR scan, or you didn't do this, because they have read all about it. Now, how do you marry that with spending time with patients, understanding their emotions, listening to them, empathizing, all that? Is that a problem, or am I just inflating it too much?
No, it's a problem. It's a problem all over the world. I think we are going into a more reductionist kind of approach, like in the States, and more investigations, and rather than a sort of holistic kind of thing. You see, actually, if I told you in my professorial appointment, we brainstorm about what should happen in a consultation, and how you use the hypothetical deductive approach to sort of come to a decision as to what is going on, and then deciding on the link. Now the problem is, you see, the kind that you're talking about are the people who have Googled their symptoms and come to you before they come, like that. Now, I mean, that crowd is growing even in Sri Lanka, but I suppose not to the same extent as in a developed country. But about Googling itself, I think there is a beautiful song also, don't Google your symptoms. You have heard that. You see, the intelligent people themselves are realizing that by Googling and asking for the remote possibilities from a good doctor, you're probably doing yourself harm. So I think this will balance out eventually in the world. But it all depends, I think, on the rapport you establish with your patient at your consultation. So in the old style of clinicians, and if you have spent adequate time, even when you make a mistake, people are more tolerant, right? I mean, I know this for sure as a SHO in pediatrics. I think you must have seen Carlo's famous article in the BMJ, where I heard about 5 deaths where he was responsible for the death. So I won't go into that, but I can still remember as a SHO pediatrics how a child, I mean, those days in pediatric surgical and all were looked after in one ward, and our child who had a fracture femur was on a Thomas's splint, somehow complained of pain, and I checked the dorsalis, I checked the warmth and everything, it was fine. And I told the nurse on duty, call me if the pain persists, but you can use paracetamol and all that. But this guy never called me. And the next day, there was a real compartment syndrome, I think, would have ended up with a Walkman's contraction. This was in Newcastle upon Tyne, right? Okay. I can still remember I was severely reprimanded by the orthopedic surgeon who looked after, but the parents did not utter a word against me. They did not complain. They did not claim. I thought my medical defense contribution will all go. At that time it didn't, because I had spent, because this child came after an accident fracturing, and the way I had approached them and taken the history and initiated and things like that, I think they thought I could do no wrong. So it depends on the approach, the relationship. So the time, the patient-doctor contact time, I think is certainly critical. And I hope that in this thing that there will be at least some regulation which determines that time.
Pleased to see Mevan. Mevan, nice to see you, Mevan. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Mahengee, and thank you, Dr. Narada.
I can't see Mevan. Yeah, I can see.
Nice to see you. And
yeah,
just a disclaimer, I never had the privilege of being your student, because I was caught up in that 1989 times that you mentioned.
So you are junior to the 89 batch, is it?
Just below, and that's the time I left the country.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Looking back, just 2 questions, and my first question straightforward is that, you mentioned about the social circle that you created, and I think Professor Saroj mentions about his Kalakavya, and during our times we restarted the Kalakavya. And these were like just like small, things just pop up and they just
You're quite right. You're quite right.
Yeah. Today it's very refined, and in fact, I totally agree with Mahesh about and Diniti about the caliber and the standards. My first question is related to that. Since you have been so active, reader and a participant of these circles, do you have any physician poets today that you can name few? I mean, I constantly look forward to reading. Of course, I've read Rasikas, and I know Ruan has an ability to write Hituana, but he has not published a book to my knowledge.
I have two students of mine. Both, one is a professor in biochemistry. She was actually a graduate in human biology. She writes very nice poetry. And then I have another student of mine, Vasantika, who is an ENT surgeon, who also writes poetry. I know quite a few other doctors, Shanta Etiarachi writes beautiful poetry. In fact, Shanta writes a poem every week to the actor called Havata Neme Pandurata Kiela. I don't know whether you have seen that. The collection of those are very politically significant poems, and a collection of those are being published by him as a book. So I know many, quite a few doctors, not specialists, who do write poetry. Quite a few.
Mevan?
Yes.
I also can give you a few names. Dr. Bodhini Samaratunga and Dr. Nuwan Thotawatha and Dr. Vatsala Kannangara. So they have published books of poetry.
My own batchmate, Dr. Shamuna Singh, who lives in Colchester, he has published, I believe, 4 or 5 books, and 4 of them are
of poetry. Of poetry, really?
Yes.
In English or in Sinhala?
Sinhala. I'm talking about Sinhala poetry. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Padmani.
Hi, Narada.
Hi, Padmini. How are you?
My batchmate, your student or colleague, I don't know, Malini Epa. She has written many books on poetry.
Really?
Yes. So refer to her books.
Right. Okay.
She's here in the audience.
If you have a link, please send me the link if you have a link to one of them.
Yeah, I will.
If I have a follow-up question, if you pardon me, you don't have to answer this, but this is not directly related to the topic that we discuss in this context of today's Sri Lankan political background. I do understand you being a Sama Samajist. I knew about that long time ago, but you never played active politics at the university level, but your inclinations were quite clear. And today, again, we don't have to comment on this. Today, we are in a situation where, for the first time in the history of Sri Lanka, we have a leader who is at least leftist oriented. That's how it was mentioned in the Western media. It's a Marxist politician. I never saw that as in Sri Lankan. The newspapers, I was there last 2 months, but it's mentioned as a Marxist politician, and maybe the ralla is towards that direction. And I think after 1949 or something like that, when N.M. Pereira was the opposition leader, Sri Lankan leftist politics have never been into the forefront like this. Of course, he was a finance minister, but what do you think of this? Because to me, this is the democratization of a youthful movement in the 70s and 80s. Now, pretty much to me, is it a reincarnation of the old left now coming into democratic?
Certainly not. Actually, they have never acknowledged the old left as left publicly. The new left or this thing, they have never acknowledged the role. I really believe from the state council days up to about, I think the decline in Sri Lanka started from about 1977. That's my own interpretation, right? These things, and they talk about the 76 years curse, which is wrong. And many of the things that we enjoy, we are the highest in physical quality of life index, human development index in South Asia, much above India or Pakistan or anything like that, due to the interventions done by I think done by the leftist parties. Even say the free education bill was passed in the State Council by CWW Kannangara with the active support of NM Perra at a time when D.S. Ranayaka was abroad.
Excuse me, Narada and Mevan. I think we are deviating a little bit from the topic.
Right, okay.
These are important areas to consider, but I think we should leave it for another forum. Thank you for bringing that.
I understand. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay, Mevan. Any direct related question to the poetry? And Ruan has put his hand up.
So, but I don't want to give a negative impression now that he asked. I must say I am viewing the situation very optimistically. That's all I can say. I'm viewing the situation very optimistically. Right?
Thank you. Ruan.
Thank you very much. In my time, I can remember, the eras of, the poetry, Sinhala poetry. Now, before my time, there was the Colombo Yuga, and then there were Kavi Sammelana, Kavi debates. And then in my youth or in my childhood, I can remember Kavi Kolakario. At a drop of a hat, there would be a Kavi Kola. But people used to buy those Kavi Kola. And then, certain newspapers and certain magazines, I can remember Rasavahini, they have special, pages for poetry. Now, because I haven't been living in Sri Lanka, I don't know what's the appetite for poetry at the moment. What's your opinion on that currently? What's happening?
Kavi Kolakaryas are now not so commonly seen, but newspapers having poetry pages are definitely there. There are lots of, I know the Kavi Kolakaryas and that is about the only thing that is not there, but most of the other things are still there. Opportunities for writing poetry and enjoying poetry are still there. And I think there is a wider group of people who now read and write poetry. There is so much of poetry on the social media. There are beautiful poems on Facebook. You should read them. Of course, there are some really nasty ones also, but most of them are really good. So there is a lot of poetry in all the media today.
Do we have
so many programs relating to poetry and songs on TV and this.
In my youth, I can remember, this Kavi Hitivan Kavi, Vivada, during Vesak time, etc. Are they still happening?
Then එච්චර නෑ. සෝමවීර චන්ද්‍රසීලේ කාලේ තමයි සෝමවීර චන්ද්‍රසී was now සෝමවීර චන්ද්‍රසී was again a Samasamaji's who wrote poetry.
Moratorium,
He has written quite a and he was the first president of the Kavi Sammelane. Then තියෙන්නේ හිටිවන බයිලා and බයිලා contest, right? And now හිටිවන කවි ඒවත් තිබිලා තියෙනවා. I think if you go to YouTube, you will be able to find හිටිවන කවි contest in Sri Lanka, right? And there are some really, really nice ones. If you can go to YouTube and find some of them.
Narada, I have a question from you. Clearly, poetry can be a great influence. Considering medical students, how do you put that into the curriculum so that it's a regular occurrence and it's not dependent on somebody like you who's very keen and interested, but how it becomes part of the normal process? You see what I mean?
I think it's a bit difficult, and I don't know how many of you are aware that the New York chapter of the College of Internal Physicians has a poetry chapter, poetry faculty.
Oh.
And there is a professor and a head. And they have regular poetry meetings and readings, and all the trainees for board certification are participating in sessions of poetry. I don't know whether it is only the New York chapter. I think several other colleges, I've read about it. But I have found, I have read some of the poetry that is discussed there, etc. And I have found that that somehow creates a little bit of, I prefer the informal way of introducing it. That's the short answer to you. I prefer the informal way and motivated people like Diniti and Santusha and people like that introducing poetry insidiously into various places here and there, rather than having a formal course in poetry in medicine or something like that. You know, I think you can introduce poetry into almost any of the subjects. I think people.
But the problem with that, Narada, it will be episodic then. It will depend on who at the time. I mean, is there room for collaboration between the medical faculties and the arts faculties, for example, and have?
Certainly there is. Yeah, there is. Joint meetings and all that. There is,
Ruan?
Now, I mean, that is why you are asking these questions, because most of you are from Colombo, and we were totally deprived of any relationship with the arts faculties. Now in Jayawardenepura, there are so many activities where medical students are participating. There is a small drama competition called Vedikawa in Mahapolawata. Then there is a Geeta competition. Then all of these medical students are participating. They are along with the other students. So therefore, you don't have to put it formally into the medical curriculum. If you are in a university with the wider participation of other faculties, you get exposed to all of these.
Narada, I'm just asking you, going back to our royal days, apart from the teaching we had formally, we had so many different clubs which are active afterward. There's history club, geography club, poetry club, and so on.
I can't remember a poetry club.
Well, not poetry, but it was more literature, arts maybe. But there were things which are outside where we were engaged after school hours, just out of interest, forming groups. So is there a room like that to form clubs within the medical faculty, saying that, poetry?
My God, there are so many. I mean, Diniti being an active member now. I think Diniti, you have all kinds of clubs, isn't it?
Are there things like that, Diniti?
Yes. Yes. So about the curriculum, Colombo, now we have integrated about 2 such activities into our curriculum. One is called understanding patients' experiences through the arts. So this will happen around their 3rd year. So the whole batch, like, they are given a choice of short stories, poems, and paintings, and cinema, like movies, to choose from. And then they get into groups and they discuss whatever the piece that they choose in their group, and they come and they make a presentation and a discussion. So like, we give them about 2 weeks to do that, to prepare. So that has been happening for the last 4 years, I think.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, and but like, I think we may not be able to kind of have poetry alone, because I mean, the interests and the likes and dislikes of the students vary, and there are people who don't like poetry, so we have to be mindful of that as well. So because of that, I think we need to give them a choice of what they want to do. So after all, like, our objective is to make them more humane, and for them to understand what the patient's experiences, the feelings that they go through. So it doesn't matter actually what form of art that they use to do that. So we give them a choice because of that. So if they want, they can choose a poem. Otherwise, they can choose a short story. So we have a pool. So that's one. And the other one is called Humanitas. That is the one that Nirmalan came for. So this is a brainchild of Panduka Karunanayaka. I think he also is part of this, the group, isn't it?
I think Panduka has given a lecture on this before.
Yes. So Panduka and then Santusha is the one who produces Humanitas, and they are like, we pick a theme. So a few months ago, we had one on Tagore and his educational philosophy. And for that, we invited Professor Sandagomi Kopraheva from the Department of Sinhala in University of Colombo. So he came, and it was a joint collaborative effort by the Faculty of Medicine and the Faculty of Arts. So I'm happy to say that sort of activities also happening as a part of the curriculum. So in addition, like as Prof Narada said, we have all sorts of students activities separately. So there's a cinema club, and that's called Med Cinema. So every month they have a movie, and an academic is invited to discuss that movie with the students. So that's one of the many examples.
That's really good to hear. Thank you very much. Ruan.
Narada, just tell you, my wife is a hematologist, and still, when I ask her to tell me the cascade, the clotting cascade, she struggles, but I don't, thanks to the hematology, that cascade song taught to us by Professor Carlo Fonseca. And some of you might still remember that. I can still remember it. Lesson 11 Christmas at Dahayanagua, tissue factor calcium with Dahayanagua, 10A5 calcium with Decamanagua, Nagapudega Ekanagala Hatunaria. So this gives the whole cascade of hematology. I mean, I don't know how many of you can remember that. But what I'm trying to say is people like Professor Carlo Fonseca use their abilities in either poetry or in a humorous way to teach us medicine as well. Unfortunately, I can't remember his ECG song. If somebody can remember that, I would be very grateful.
Narada, any comments? And after that, we'll ask one more question and then we'll wind up.
Has Tiloma left? I would have liked Tiloma. Tiloma, are you here?
Yes, she's there. She's silenced though. Tiloma, Atarinda.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Now, Tiloma, I'll tell you something about Tiloma. So, Tiloma was only a couple of years junior to 1 year, I think. Anyhow, when we crossed the
1974.
Huh?
Graduated in 1974.
1974, Omari, I can remember. I will tell you, you and Anula did a seminar on resource incompatibility, correct?
Oh my God, that seminar.
Yeah, it was superb. You know, that was the first student seminar that I ever listened to. I was already, out of the block, but I had not understood quite a few points about this incompatibility. And when Anula and Tiloma did that seminar, I understood it. Okay.
That's a huge commendation, because we adored you as a teacher, Professor Narada. I'm not saying it because we are on this program, but you were so approachable. You and Dr. Nalanathan, the social pediatrics was a ball,
Right.
And
Thank you.
I would like to take this opportunity just to raise a point which has been very concerning. When I did my master's in public health, we had this lecture in sociology by Professor Hettige. Now, we were a group of about 20, little less than 20 students. But it was just myself and one other student, Harish Yakandawala, who attended it. Because I'm sorry to say, all the others thought that it was of no relevance to them. And after all, sociology, what the hell? That was their attitude, which was shocking, because in public health, I believe in more than the other disciplines, we are closer to the community. And this to me reflected a pretty scary arrogance in attitude. I don't know what the situation is now, but I think in as much as we have Saroj having established the humanities stream and Santushya and Dr. Diniti and all of them working so much in it, I don't know what is happening at the PGIM, whether there is opportunity to bring in some humaneness at that level also, because I think we need it. It sort of ties up with some of the comments all of y'all have been making about attitudes of doctors who, when they go into the private sector or work after hours, seem to be operating on different wavelengths. This is just my personal viewpoint. But if something can, at least a conversation be started to do something at the level of the PGIM, I think it might be good, because people get so concentrated into studying all the advanced things and the advanced techniques, and with so much of it becoming mechanized, we seem to be losing touch with the human.
Okay, final comment from Narada on that, and then I will sum up. I have to
Mahengee, can I just make a quick...
I hope you don't feel offended in any...
No, absolutely not. I knew that I was going sideways, but just of something in the lighter vein, I really like that Kurutugi ane minuan ube this one mage then one karayada one. I just remember that in the lighter vein when you mentioned this Kurutugi on desks and on people inscribed on wood. A short two-liner from Jayalat Manoratna, who was not only an actor but also a good poet from 70s onward. He goes back to Peradeniya, his alma mater, and become extremely nostalgic. And he finds these two lines on a desk written, and it says that the opposite, almost similar feeling. Minuan can, your eyes shut off because during Minuan's lectures, but the way he found was this: Desaka Mahata Ada Nata, Enisa Ada Nidhi Mata Nata.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Now, your final statement.
Yeah, final Tiloma. Yeah, I mentioned, I told you the PAJIM in the reckoning after 30 years thought what you said is true. And they instituted these 10 workshops. Actually, now it has become 8 workshops, which are compulsory for all before they become board certified. So all the SRs and registrars follow these workshops. And they do include one on communication, but there isn't one about humanities, I must say. There isn't a workshop on humanities, but I'm shocked that that your colleagues missed out the lecture on S.T. Hettige, who is really a very good sociologist. I'm sorry to say that that there is a limited number, but again, I will tell you, so this social pediatric program with, I think even Champa and all of will remember. Now, when we did that program, I used to love it. I loved it as a student and it as a teacher. There were some people who thought it was a real waste of time. They thought it was an utter waste of time, going to the homes and all that. And also they were completely fraudulent. For example, the dietary surveys, all cons, like about the diet in the family and all. So they used to we had a Professor Helian Veerasinghe who used to take anything seriously, So I can hear him. He was in the next room and they are going and asking, so then me koskediaka kohomada me calorie balanne atte kohomada like that and all that. And they were working out these con dietary surveys. But basically, an Australian community physician came on a short-term fellowship to Colombo in the 80s, and he wanted a project, and Earl suggested, why don't you do a feedback on this social pediatric program? And he sent families which have had the students 10 years ago, and the students who have done the program 10 years ago a questionnaire. The response rate was surprisingly high. And the thing I still remember, I'm still trying to get hold of this report, which was, I think, never published. But one thing it clearly said is, large number who had said, about 30-40% of them had said, we thought it was a complete waste of time when we were students. Many of them had changed their mind now that they were practitioners. They said that we realize now what it did for us, right? And I remember this statement in that Australian senior lecturers saying how the mind has changed after they had actually gone and become doctors. But when they were students, they hated it. At least, not many loved it. I think like Tiloma and Saroj, I still remember the good students, Saroj and Dhamani and all, how they did in the social pediatrics. but many liked it, but there were some who really hated it and also conned the entire thing. They didn't do it properly, but they used to prepare a nice report without actually doing it. I think.
Thank you, Narada. We all grow, we all mature, we all learn, we all understand better as we get older. So this is the natural course of things. Lots of us started being doctors because that was a nice profession to have a reasonable salary and we respected in society. That's why I started. But once you get into it, you realize the wider perspective and you adapt to it and you change. So Narada, thank you very much for speaking to us. You brought a lot of thought into it, and certainly we're all impressed by what you said. There are a lot of chat messages congratulating you and thanking you for coming today. I won't read all of them, but almost everybody has said how much they enjoyed it. So can we now unmute ourselves? Please unmute ourselves. And in the traditional way, we'll put our hands together and give a round of applause to Narada Warnasuriya.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure meeting most of you whom I know. Right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Just before I finish, Ruan, is there any announcement to make on the next one? Do we know the date or anything?
Yes, yes, we have. It's Dr. Ruan Ekanayake is talking about Sunil Shanta's music, and I think it's 20th of October, which is Sunday.
Okay, so keep that in mind and visit SLLS website. Lal Shant, anything you want to say now? Good. Okay.
Just a very quick one.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't get your words because everybody wants lots of questions. So it's a very interesting presentation, and I'm not a poet at all, but I think your presentation sort of brings on sort of like desire to explore the poet in me. So who knows?
Yeah.
That's good.
Narada is the Heineken. He reaches parts which normal beers don't, So there.
Okay, thank you.
Right then. Okay, thanks. See you, Shanta.
Okay, Narada. All the best.
Right, Lal. Yeah.
Okay, so with your permission, I'm going to end the meeting now. This will be recorded.
You have done it well in time for me to go for the dinner.
There will be a YouTube recording of it, and that will happen soon. I'll let you know. Okay. So once again, thank you everybody for coming, and I hope to see you again. All the best.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.